Moving along, we now have with us another eminent speaker, Dr. Anupam Ahuja, Professor and former head, International Relation Division and Department of Education, Special Needs Group, NCERT. Diversity in education encompasses various dimensions, including learning styles and inclusion of children with special needs in mainstream classroom. Anupam ma'am will now enlighten us on how teachers can connect with neurodiverse children in the classroom. She will also explore new ways to make our classroom more balanced and inclusive. Please put your hands together for Dr. Anupam Ahuja.
Hello. Very good morning to everybody. There we go. That's my special need in order to meet you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for welcoming me into this family. My mother was a Sai Bhakt, and it took me that long to be with you. So thank you very much. Better late than never, they say. Professor Anand, the speaker before me, talked about person first. I'm going to focus today morning on children first. Of course, there are persons as well soon. But when we are talking about embracing minds, I'll be focusing on how do we celebrate diversity. Professor Victoria also talked about, Professor Anand mentioned, persons. So when we are celebrating diversity, I presume we are celebrating it already in my title. And I'm going to take you years ago when you were in your classrooms, and currently also when you see classrooms. So let's take a look at how we celebrate diversity in our classrooms. Do we really I'm using two words, and probably actually three. When I repeat one, I'm asking everybody here in this audience to think about all equal. That's really, really a puzzle. All equal. Is every child in our eyes equal? I ask this question because I feel we talk about children diversity, but we are diverse as well. Do I see a child who has not done his homework, as simple as that, is not looking at me, has his hair all ruffled, his clothes not in place, and by him is a child sitting who is absolutely prim and proper and well-dressed and alert and looking at me, eager to learn. Just this diversity. Am I, as a teacher, going to look at them with the same focus in my eyes? Am I really appreciating diversity? I was in a country where people are trying to move towards celebrating diversity, like our country here. And they said for a month, we are going to use this poster everywhere. I saw this poster on the mugs, the coffee mugs. I saw this poster on bulletin boards. I went to a toddler's class and I saw this poster within the visual range of children, not put up right at the wall up there, but within their visual range. And I wondered what this poster is all about. I leave it for you to look at closely when I say, give me a minute. Yeah, there we go. I leave this poster for you to think about, because I kept thinking about it for many, many months. Do our children really have the right to be different? This poster showed us some animals which were different. If we transfer this visual into our classrooms, our children are standing on rooftops and asking us, do I really have the right to be different? Because despite all the progress we have made, and we have made sufficient progress, because I remember when I joined NCRT way back in 86, yes, I'm not 16 years old, okay, way back in 86, our goal was just getting children in and looking at our enrollment drives, you know. And we used to be very happy saying, this state's enrollment drive has gone up here, you know, look at the way we are getting children into schools, and we were very excited about it. But after we got them in, we also realized that we were pushing some children out of schools, and we started using the word dropout. But I do not agree with the term. No child wants to leave school. No parent wants to see the child in the street. No child, whether with parents or without parents, does not want the teacher's love and affection. They don't want to be naughty. They don't want to pinch their child next door. They don't want to create ruckus. But when we do something in the class which does not engage them, they will do what I just said. So, despite the progress we have made, learning opportunities actually continue to be unequal. And unequal for many. To the extent, if I look at global figures, and I'm not doing, this is not based on my research, this is what UNESCO is saying, 1 in 5 children, adolescents and youth, are entirely excluded from our education system. So it's a big number. Our policy, which again Professor Anand gave you, I was here only today morning, so I am looking at some presentations that were done in the morning, mentioned about holistic learning. I go to the policy again as well, because that's where I earn my bread and butter from, implementing the policy and formulating it as well. There again, there is a mention of not just a few lakh children, not just a small number, but crores of children still in the age group of 6 to 17, it says, are out of school. They haven't been pushed out. They still simply are not in school. So the problem is really something that we need to address, and we have slept over it, I think, for a very long time, because we are now a country which has enjoyed more than 70 years of independence, and we cannot blame anyone for giving us something or doing what they were doing. So, just a minute. I want to go to my next slide. Yeah. I wasn't pressing too hard, it was my problem. Sorry for that. If we look at the international and national perspectives, there's a common thread that runs. And those terms the policy uses, but there is a term that, again, will not allow us to sleep peacefully, because there's a common thread that runs in the SDG goals and the NEP, and a legal binding, that is the Right for Persons with Disability Act, which says that we should educate all children in regular schools under one roof. Now, the common thread that runs through these acts, the policies, and the conventions that I have talked about is equitable opportunities and inclusive education for all, and thus the relevance of the theme from integral to inclusion that we are talking about today. Despite 25 years of debate, both at the international level and a consensus on inclusive education that was agreed upon, the concept still remains really elusive to many. And I quote who says this in my presentation, and I go to my next slide, which says the simple question of why inclusive education. When I move in my country, and I have done that for many, many years, Children, teachers, children, parents, they all look at me very often, and my colleague there, Dr. Bharti, who's sitting, who gave you an excellent presentation yesterday. They look at us and they say, these weird educationists, what are they talking about, including everybody in class? I mean, I have 80 children. Come and sit with me the whole day, And now you're saying include these children also? I mean, okay, you may have trotted the globe and you may be convinced about it and the policy may be saying it, but this is not practical. So stop living in a world, a fool's paradise. Actually, I try to sum up, and I share what I sum up, and I tell them. First, I tell them, we are not asking you to do something new. You already have children who are different in your classrooms, right? There are children, a child may be strong and hefty, want to box the other one's nose. There may be a child who can sing very well. There may be a child who holds his ears like this when a child is singing. You have these differences, and you have differences in learning styles. And when I ask them, do you agree? They say, yes, you're right, they are there. So one is accepting that they are already there. The difference exists. All you need to do is to share your learning. That's where we start from, because we don't tell them, this is what you do and you will achieve inclusion, because that will never work. We say, share your learning of how you are accommodating these differences. We are talking about looking at differences in a wider perspective. And why we are doing it is because we Sanki, slightly weird educationists have done research. And you know what research globally tells us? Research globally tells us, and I will sum it up in only 3 things that I tell teachers, and that's a fact. Research tells us that when we teach and we accommodate differences amongst children together, we improve the performance of every child in the classroom. And that is something that a teacher then just looks at you with bright eyes. Because every teacher wants to improve the performance of every child. The second thing that follows from what we say to them is, and then that also they agree is, that when you challenge yourself to teach children with diverse learning needs in your classroom, without putting labels on their chests, you become a better professional. And that also they agree. And every teacher wants to become a better professional, surely. The third thing we say is that research tells us that when we practice this in the classrooms and in the schools early on, in the foundational period and during the school life of a child, we contribute towards building what, again, Professor Anand was referring to, inclusive societies. Now, nobody can have a separate metro for the blind only. Nobody can have a separate metro for the child with autism. Mind you, I said child with autism. I did not say an autistic child. I did not use the term low vision in a book that I had finalized because a mother came to me and said, look, ma'am, all that you're talking about, I am working on my child, whom I know has remaining sight. So who am I to give a caption to my book saying it's a handbook for the low vision children? No, it's a handbook for children who have remaining sight. And this positive terminology gives the teacher, the parent, the other children in the class a positive way of looking at diversity. So with this rationale that I have just built for you is what, not again NCERT, what NCERT is saying. Our research also incidentally indicates this, but this is what is part of global research. And that is why the world over we are screaming for promoting inclusive education. Again, it will not arrive on a Monday morning. It's a process that will take time for us to internalize, for us to think about and reflect. And I think all the previous speakers and those who follow me will say the same. So I have summed the why of inclusion already. I'll go to my next slide, which talks about some of the nuances that exist when we talk about equity. Many parts of the world and many parts in our country, we have focused only on children with disabilities when we talk about inclusion. And when inclusion bandwagon came with all its music, many of us simply removed the special education label and the integrated education label and pasted inclusive education on it. And we told ourselves we are practicing inclusive education. Unfortunately, we have to reflect on what we are doing, and it is pasting inclusion is not going to really, the term inclusion is not going to make us inclusive. Do we really believe that a sex worker's daughter, if she sits by me, my daughter, both will learn? Do I really believe that a cobbler, a child who is comes from a cobbler's family, has the same place in my classroom? Or do I look at them with some lenses that tell me to discriminate? Do I look at a child who brings a separate plate in his bag, because when the midday meal will be distributed, he will have to pull that plate out to get his serving, whereas other children will be eating from the plates that are there in the classroom, because that child belongs to a family that is not part of the society. Why should we differentiate children like this? Did the child choose to be born where he was born or she was born? No. Did we choose to be born where we were born? These are questions that I say are part of the nuance of inclusion and the concept of equity that needs to be understood more closely. I will now take you over to some of the definitions, which I leave this slide for this PPT for you to think later on. But what do we mean when I say that we are not going to just change labels and that every learner matters? I am feeling challenged today in not maintaining the rhythm of my slides. My apologies for that. But I have to get a hang of it. I did. Okay, look at this. Oops, oops, oops. Yes, there we go. That's a visual which says it all. But I need to add another visual with equality and equity when the barrier also is removed. Okay? So we don't need the boxes. This fencing, if it goes in the third visual, which doesn't exist, then it is open for every child to see the cricket match. Yeah? That's what we want you and I to help our teachers think together about. All students learn together in the same classroom. They don't sit together. If there are two children who are visually challenged, if they just sit by each other all day for the 8 months or the 9 months that the school runs in an academic year, that's not inclusion. Because then they are with each other, but the others don't know much about them. And they do not know much about the others. So there is a lot of planning that we need to do when we are talking about inclusive education. I am now going to spend some time talking about some initiatives. How much time do I have? Sorry, as a teacher, I always lose. Yeah, okay. I'm going to now spend some time talking about, Hariharanji, how much time do I have? 10 minutes, okay. So I will not take the slides. I will, because I will talk about, in the 10 minutes, 2 or 3 important initiatives that we tried our hand at in NCERT, which helped us understand how to make accessible material for children in classrooms, and how this experience also made us learn a lot about inclusion. We had worked on some storybooks that existed in, actually a reading series that existed at NCERT, and the research told us that this reading series has made a big difference in children's reading skills. So we said charity begins at home. Let us look at this reading series and try to make it accessible. You would ask, why should we look at a reading series in the early years to explore accessibility? We wanted to look at a reading series simply because we know that a story is very dear to every child. You and I know that we still remember the story that our grandmother used to, narrate to us, and we would ask her to say it 5 times, 6 times, and then say, again, please repeat it. And it would never be enough to hear it from her ears. So, from her, and it was music to our ears. So we took our storybooks, and these storybooks had 3/4 of the page was simply a visual, with a single line below the visual, which was meant for children. And this was very, very small storybooks with just 16 pages. First and foremost, what our experience told us was that if we were to prepare something for, if we see the braille material for children in classrooms, they are often that thick. A teacher says, open page 13 of your textbook. The child's braille book is page 48. She usually forgets to announce page 48 as well. The braille books reach children in the month of August. Other children have already their books in place in the beginning of the year, and they have enjoyed the idea of opening a new book, whereas a child who is visually challenged may not really get that experience. A visually challenged children usually sits in one corner of the classroom to read with his book and is almost part of the furniture. Right? Now, these are givens. So we said, we are going to make our book accessible in a way that it is a book for all. It's not just a book which some children read and others don't. Let me quickly take you through what we did. We put the single line in the story that was there at the below of the visual. We made the text, the braille below the text. Okay? So a visually challenged child and a sighted child can open the spiral-bound storybook and read it together. We put a red dot to say that the line ends, and a green dot to indicate that that's the beginning of the sentence. Because we found teachers struggling with this number of times, telling children, yahan se padho, ye. And they would move around the classroom, ordering children, oh, you've missed it, So we wanted, these were all research-based additions that we did to the text. We, based on what was written in the story, on the page, we made the visual tactile. So the visual also became meaningful for everybody. The difficult word popped up in the digital version. There was a video in sign language, just like our professionals here are giving, which young children could read, could view as an introduction to the story. These and many other features that we added made it a book for all. We made this textbook both in print form and digital version. During the COVID time, our CIT website was exploding because children were reading these digital storybooks with such vigor and such passion. And we had many secrets of homes also being revealed in their texts that they wrote. For example, they said, Mom and Dad are fighting, we are reading this story together. The noise is increasing in that room. We are increasing the volume of our story, So you would have such personal, descriptions also. You could pinch the text to make it according to your visual need. You could make it 46, pinch out and pinch in. You could change the background. You could play with, you would have the pop-up difficult word coming up in the digital version. So they became stories that every child could enjoy. An arrow on the bottom of the page helped the child navigate the text. So if you are a person with autism or a child with autism, you can go back to page 2, simply navigating on your own without being shouted at by anybody or without being warned by anybody that, look, every child in the class has reached page 14 and you are still struggling with on page 4. Now, these sort of derogatory comments that often become part of collective reading were very naturally taken care of with these small interventions that we made to make the material accessible. We tried this also with our textbooks. We did this for the early years because we wanted to lay the foundation of inclusion and the proper attitude towards differences during the foundational period of development. You know, when you become polluted with what we all say, we adults, then it becomes difficult to change attitudes. Attitudes becomes a big issue. So we said, let's take young children, let's make them enjoy their stories, and let's make them accessible so that they can then enjoy reading along with other children. And that's where we are laying the foundation for inclusion for all children in the classrooms. We took this learning into our textbooks. It's all available on our website. We took this learning from the storybooks and our textbook chapters to preparing e-content guidelines during COVID for developing e-content for children with disabilities as well. So one thing has led into a lot, and we hope now that with this learning behind us, and with a lot of work which Dr. Bhati has done with her team, with the textbooks and converting them, making the NCERT textbooks accessible, we hope to take all this learning into our new textbooks that we are developing from NCERT. And we hope that when we ask an open-ended statement to children, learning from textbooks is, often we get boring. Yeah, and that boring is said by sometimes 9 out of 10 children. And then one wonders, should we not lock up the doors of NCERT? Because if we are preparing and developing textbooks that are making 9 out of 10 children say that it is boring, it's a wake-up call. Well, it's not all children who say that. We also have many of us sitting here who are what we are using the NCERT textbook. So I am not trivializing the efforts that the organization is making, but I am at the same time highlighting that we need to think for all. We need to make everything that we develop accessible for all. So I sum this by saying the problem is not how to wipe out differences. The problem is to live with differences. And I don't say this. This is Rabindranath Tagore's words. And there is a visual here at the end of my slides, which shows him with these words and quotes. I request you to get a chance, if you do, to just go through this PPT presentation if you want, because it elaborates what I have said. Our efforts are on. We look forward to all of you joining hands with us to make our classrooms, teaching learning material, and pedagogy suitable for every learner, because every learner matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You have touched on some notable points. The highlights was usage of the Universal Design Learning, UDL principle, to minimize barriers and maximize learning of each student, the adapted Barka series, and the accessible e-content. You touched upon the roles and skills of teachers for making the classroom inclusive, as every learner matters and matters equally. These core ideas, when put into practice, will be of benefit for all. Thank you so much for these insights once again, ma'am. That really calls for another big round of applause. Now, I'd like to invite Professor Saujanya Puri, Director, Career Guidance and Dean Center for Language and Communication, Kolkata, and SSSVV State Coordinator, West Bengal, to felicitate Professor Anupam Ahuja.